So from previous sessions, we saw what is Spring Boot, we saw introduction, we saw how to create Spring Boot project and import it to our Eclipse IDE, add dependencies and those things. And we also saw how to write API endpoints, right? How to expose API endpoints, get requests from other hosts, other programs, and process the data and send back the response, right? In this, we also saw some of the annotations like at repository, at what? At component, we did not see our at controller and at get mapping, at post mapping, all these we saw, right? So today we will see how to parse the JSON object that we send from the front end application in the backend application and parse that body, request body, that is called as request body. We have some form in the front end, or we have to send from data from the front end. Nowadays, earlier we used to use both. We used to use XML as sending data as a format for sending data from one server to another server. Okay, but nowadays we generally use JSON object. Okay, JSON object is used as a data packet or a bag like thing, which acts like a bag, which holds some data in the manner of key value pairs. For this key, this is the value, and we use that in the backend, process that, and send back the response as it is required. Okay, let us start from the front end. I have created one simple front end application. So let me share my screen. Okay, cool. So I hope you all know how to create a React project and code React components and display whatever it is required in the UI, right?
Yes, sir.
I hope I'm not assuming this. You all know these things and you have done some projects also, right? So our React app starts from index.js, and index.js renders app component, and app component is this, which from where our React components start. And inside this, we can write code, and whatever we write code here or whatever we code here, it is displayed on the browser, right? So I have created a simple component called create book form. Okay, it is a form. I go to that file and whatever I have here is a form. Okay, I'll show it in the UI. I'm running this application. Go back here. So you see this. This is a simple form. We have book management application where we create books with authors and we store it in database and do all the CRUD operations that is required. Okay, so this is a simple application, a web application, which forms the front end of the web application, and it is created out of React. Okay, what do we have? We have a simple form, a header, a form. Inside that we have label and inputs of type text, and we have submit button. Okay, only 3 elements in our form. Now we have to accept the data from this form. Okay, we have to accept the data from this form, which is entered by the user. Which book shall I take? Okay, let me take Ramayana. So let me inspect this, Control-Shift-I. And see, you see the network tab. This is how we debug whether the API call is made or not, like that. Okay, so I tell Ramayana and author will be like Valmiki, and I hit submit. Okay, so we are sending the API call, or we are sending data through an API call to create a book. It is failed because we have not yet started the server. We get the error like go here. So there is no server. So we have to start the server. Before that, any doubts here? Any questions here? This is the front end job. Okay, we have the form, and how do we take the input in the form data? We have to write 2 handlers. One is for handle input change, and for that we have taken use state variables as it is called, and that state variable is an object. That particular object contains 2 things. One is book's name and another is book author. Okay, now we have to change it is empty string. Initially it is an empty string. We have to give the value for these things before sending it to the backend. How do we take that as the value and put it as the values for these 2? This is how we put it. Okay, we call this set form data. Can anyone tell what is this use state? Use state.
It is a hook. We can use it by using it. We can assign a value to the variable in functional component.
Exactly. Use state is a React hook. It is a normal JavaScript function, guys. Okay, internally it works as a normal JavaScript function. What does it return? We use this state variables to manage the state of the application. Okay, state of this particular page or particular component. Okay, create book form is a component to manage the state. What do you mean by state? in Java, we have studied state means state of an object, attributes, right? In the same way, this is the state for this component, book name and book author, whose value can change, right? So this particular, did you get my point? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have this component, create book form is a component. For that, these two are the states, okay, book name and book author. We that value may keep changing, okay, as our state value, state or attributes can change in Java objects. You can consider this as an object, and this use state variables are as states, state of this object, okay. And this function, this use state function, returns two things. What are those? What are those? These are some of the important interview questions, guys. What is use state? What does it return? What does it return? It returns two things. One is the previous value, and another is a function to set that value, okay, or to reset that value, to be more precise. So we have form data. If we console log this form data before setting any value to it, it will print an empty string for both this book name and book author. Once we set that form data to some data, this set form data is a function. What are we doing here, guys? Before equals. Hello? What are we doing here? Or what are we doing here? What is this process called?
The destructure.
Yeah, exactly. This is what is called as destructuring. It returns an array. Okay, in that array it contains two things. One is the previous value of that particular object or string or anything, and a function to set the data. We are destructuring that array and telling that first thing will be the previous data, and another thing will be a function to reset that data. So here we are doing destructuring of that array object that is returned by useState function, and using this, we get the previously set data, and using this function, we can set the data or reset the data. Okay, so handle input change will reset the data. Okay, so if you come here, name of this input is book name. For this book name, this value should be given, and for this book author, this value should be given. This is how we take the input and set it as the form data. Form data state, set it the values for form data like this. Okay. Don't get confused if you are not familiar with React. It's okay, it's fine. You have to code, okay? You have to work on it. This cannot be taught in 5 to 10 minutes. You should have strong foundation. Here we are doing array destructuring, and here we are, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? This is what is called as
Spread operator.
This is a spread operator, but what are we doing here?
We copy that value.
Yeah, this is called as deep copy. Okay, we copy everything from this form data, the earlier form data, and replace the book author. If it is the book author value got changed, we replace the book author with new value. If book name got changed, we replace that book name with new value. Okay, this is what we are doing here. And we have to handle submit. We have to get the data. For that, we use this handle input change function, and we have to submit the data which is entered by the user. And for that, we use handle submit, and we have written this code which sends the data to the backend. How it is sending? We are using the fetch function, which is of the JavaScript plain JavaScript function. We can either use we have something called as Axios package. We can use that with React, but I'm using a normal fetch function. We are sending the request to this particular URL. It is a post call, and header is headers contains what the kind of data and what kind of application we are sending, and we send it as a string. We have to send the body. This is the request body, and it is stringified. The JSON is stringified and sent as the object to the backend. Clear? Any questions here? Hello? Any questions? Any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, if any questions, please ask. Samir, you raised your hand. No questions? Okay. So we send the data as JSON object, and we just repeat this. Sorry. And if the response is okay, we get a response object, and if it is okay, then we console log something. If it is not okay, we console log something. We console log the error, and we set the book name and author value as empty string again. Okay, so we come back here. First, let me start the server. Okay, I'll start the server. So we have started the server, and just give Ramayana and author as, and I clear this and submit. You see, this particular data or this particular API call hit the server and payload. Payload means the data that we are going to send from front end to back end. What was the payload? It is an object with book author as the key and Valmiki as the value, book name as the key, and Ramayana as the value. Okay, and what is the response did we get? What happened? I think it is here. Sometimes we come back here and you see data, I write and I write Vyasa and I hit submit. Okay, so response was 200 and it is okay, and response failed to load response. Okay, what are we sending in response? We'll see. Stop the server. So when we send the data, where should it go, guys? What is happening? Can anyone tell? Hello?
Backend, it will go controller class.
Yeah.
The method that we have passed.
We have a server-side application, and it is the Spring Boot application. We have controller class, we have service class, and we have repository class, right? Controller class is used to expose API endpoints, and it handles all the API requests that is sent to that server, right? When we tell that you send request to this URL with this particular data, it sends the request to this. Where are we exposing this? We are exposing it. Let's close this. We are exposing it in a controller class. Where is our controller class? It is in the controller package. We go back here and you see, so here we come, and this is the particular method that is being that is being exposed to create a book. We are not receiving any response because we are not sending any response. Instead, I send a string as response. Okay, I create it as a string and I return a string. Return book created successfully. Okay, so we save this, and what are we doing here? We are having a book service object. So controller class, we know it will not handle any particular business logic thing. It will just delegate everything to some other classes like service class or repository class. So underlying layer of the controller class, controller layer, is a service layer which handles the business logic. Okay, so we have to create a book service reference, and we tell that when this particular class is created, you also create a book service object and initiate that object to this particular reference. Okay, we call the save book and pass the book. Before that, we go into that service layer. One thing I want to tell here is, what are we sending there as the data? What are we sending there as the data? Our data is like this, right? We have an object, and inside that we have book name is Samveda and book author as Vyasa. Okay, we have some object like this, and this is sent as the request body. Okay, so how do we parse this request body? To parse this request body, we have some annotation. We have an annotation called as request body annotation. We have to import this request body annotation, and we have to parse this request body. And this request body annotation does another work also, another thing also. What does it do is, it picks up the state or picks up that key value pair and maps it to the object of Java. Okay, we have a book class with same named attributes. Okay, we come here, it is in the model class. Okay, so we have same book name and book author, which is also same here. Where is our controller class? So book name and book author should be of same name, and it maps the values of these keys to the attributes of book object and creates that book object. Is it clear? I'll just note it as points. First thing it will do is it parses the request body. Okay, that is sent from the request. Second thing it does is it just maps the values of those particular request body key value pairs to the attributes of the Java object. Okay, and third thing, creates the Java object, creates the object with that particular with state values as that is sent by the request body. Okay, with the state value with respective state values of in the request body. Is it clear? Guys, is this clear? We are sending the request. Along with the request, we have got this body, we have got the data from the form, okay, that is sent as the request body. To parse this request body, or to use that data, we have to use this annotation called as request body annotation. The work of this annotation is that it parses the request body and converts, just to put it in a single sentence, it parses that request body, that JSON object, and converts that JSON object to Java object and creates the Java object along with the values that is present for that key value pairs, and those name, the name here and the name in the book class of the state should be same. If it is same, it will pick up this value and maps this value to that variable, that instance variable. Any questions, any doubts? Is this clear? This is an important concept to know here, how to parse and how to create the object out of JSON. Everything is done by this annotation. You just do this and it will create the object. Clear? Any questions, guys? Hello? Is it making any sense? Hello?
Hello.
Is it clear?
Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So now this happened, we have parsed the request. This is a thread of execution of a full stack application I'm explaining. We created a front-end application which contained a form. In that form, we sent the request along with the request body, and that request body is a kind of JSON object, and that data is mapped, or that API call is mapped to this function. And in this function, we have this @request body annotation, which converts that request body, that JSON request body object to the Java object. Okay. Now the controller will processes and delegates the work of saving the book to the service class by calling save book method. Okay, we'll go to save book method of service class. So we have something like, we have an interface, book service. It is the implementation of DAO design pattern. We provide an interface first, then we will give the implementation. So we have this service implementation. What are we doing here? We have save book method and we are calling book repository.save. We do not have any business logic to perform in the service layer. We just need to save this data to the database. Who should talk to the database? Which layer? Which layer normally talks to database in the Spring Boot application? Here. Hello?
Persistence layer.
It's, yeah, persistence layer or a repository layer. So persistence layer should talk to database. There is no business logic. So we are calling this save method on this book repository. The same way we have book repository interface and an implementation for this interface. And what are we doing here in this particular repository class is we are creating a SQL command. Okay, what kind of statement is this? How many statements do we have in JDBC? We have 4. How many? Hello? We have 3 statements. One is a normal statement, second is a prepared statement, and third is a callable statement. We use prepared statement to get the connection and create the SQL statement, okay? And we send back the data to the database, okay? And this data goes and sits into the database. We call execute command, execute query, and this executes this particular query and sets the values for the columns in the table, in the book table. Is this much clear? I'll explain how to get the connection and establish connection with a particular database and everything. Is this thread of execution starting from front end up to this, talking to database, up to this repository layer? Is this clear? Hello?
Yes.
Any questions? Any doubts? Any doubts, guys? No doubts? Okay, cool then. So now we have to get the connection to the database, which is an outside, a third-party resource from our project. Okay. So for that, what we should do is we should start from form.xml. Okay. We have something called as form.xml, right? What does it contain? Form.xml?
Dependencies.
Dependencies that we have used for this particular project. So in this form.xml, we already get two dependencies for a project that we created out of star.spring.io website using Spring Web as dependency. We have two dependencies, which is Spring Boot Starter Web and Spring Boot Starter Test. We have to add two more dependencies, and that is Spring Boot Starter Data JDBC, and we have to use MySQL connector Java. Okay, how do we get this? We get it here. Go back here and Spring Initializer. And if you search for dependencies, JDBC, you see Spring Data JDBC. You have to add this dependency, okay? And another dependency is MySQL driver, okay? These two dependencies you should add along with web, okay? You have to add Spring Data JDBC, you have to add MySQL driver, and you have to add Spring Web. Is this clear? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So we come back here. MySQL connector Java and Spring Starter Data JDBC. These are the two dependencies that we should have in order to use JDBC and MySQL database for our project. Okay. And one more thing is that we have to configure the database as we used to do in the JDBC lab. We did what are all the things that we did? We had what are all the steps did we take to establish connection? We should have a database. We should have database driver, a respective database driver. We should load or we should add the jar files for that driver to our project. Then we should load that driver manager class. Then we should establish connection using connection object of java.sql package. Then we should create the statement. Then we should execute the statement, right? Do you remember? Recall? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So we have all these things ready by Spring Boot project itself. If you add dependency for JDBC and MySQL connector, adding a jar file for the driver, everything will be taken care by Spring Boot starter application. Only thing is we have to provide the information about our database. We have to add URL as we used to do in normal JDBC project. We have to have URL, password, username, and a driver manager class loaded, right? That we do using this. In source/main/resources package, you have a file called as application.properties. We do not use these informations like this in a normal project, normal file in a .java file. In a production environment where an application is in production environment, these data are personal. These data are vulnerable and secure. These should be kept secured. That is why we use this application.properties as the resources, and we define this particular all the particular data that is required to establish connection using this application.properties file. Here we define spring.datasource.url, and this is the data source, and for this data source, this is the URL, this is the username, and this is the password, and this is the class, fully qualified class name for driver, JDBC driver. Okay, and we have something called as Hibernate that you need not worry about now. Okay, and this is how we configure the required credentials for our database. Is this clear? First thing is adding dependencies. Second thing is defining the credentials in application.properties file. Clear? Any questions? Any questions, guys? Any doubts, any questions till now, till this point? Okay, I hope no questions. Then we have a little thing to configure to establish connection using connection object. How do we do this? We create one more package for database configuration. And in this configuration, we have to define the data source. Okay. And this data source object is used for JDBC template. And then we use this JDBC template to establish connection. Clear? So what we do is we load the driver manager class or create the object of driver manager class, and we set the URL and everything that is stored in the application.properties, and we extract those properties using @value annotation. Okay, this is a configuration class, so we annotate it with @configuration, and these are all. And this @configuration helps to extract values from application.properties file. Okay, and here we have @value, and this will extract all the particular single data from the application.properties file. Okay, and we have to define. You need not memorize all these things. You should just know how you can do this. Okay, and you just define the data source and create a JDBC template and export all these credentials wherever it is required. Is this much clear? Hello? Any questions, guys? First thing, I repeat, first thing we have to add two dependencies. One is JDBC, Spring Data JDBC. One more thing is MySQL connector. And next is we have to give the credentials for our database, the URL, the username, the password, and the fully qualified class name for driver class. Okay. Then we have to configure it as a bean, as a data source using configuration annotation. And we tell that for this project, this is the data source, and set the data source driver class as this, set the data source URL as this, and set the data source username and password as this respectively. And we create JDBC template using that particular data source. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Then we come to this book repository implementation class. Here we create the connection object. Okay, so you create data config object, and it is auto-wired. Okay, you have this auto-wired annotation, means this book repository implementation will have the data config object and initialize the database. Okay, so you initialize the database. This belongs to system class. You initialize database using this data config. Okay, and you get all the data config credentials to establish connection. This particular method will establish connection and give back the connection object, which can be used wherever it is required. Clear? This initialize database is a method where you create the table if it does not exist, which is called as books table. Okay, and ID is an auto increment ID, and it is of int, and it is a primary key, and name and author. You have three fields. You have ID, you have name, and you have author. Okay, and you created you print some message so that you come to know that the database table is created with this connection. Clear? Is this much clear, guys? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Everybody out there, is it not going above head? I repeat the steps because it should sit in your mind how to create the database connection. One, you should add the dependencies. Second, you should give the credentials in application.properties. And third is what? You have to create the data source object, and you have to create the JDBC template. And fourth is you have to establish connection, and you have to initialize the database. Clear? We establish connection using connection object, creating the connection object using driver manager class and calling get connection and passing. We used to do this driver manager.get connection and pass URL, username, and password. Same thing we are doing here. Okay, and get the connection. Using this connection, we will create the table if it does not exist. If it exists, you just don't create table, and you call the save book. And using this connection object, we create a prepared statement, and to insert the book object, and you create the book.get name and prepared statement 2 means the second variable. For first, you add book name. For second variable, you add book author, and you call execute update. So this is the, and if you go and see in the database, I'll just open up the database. Where is that? MySQL workbench. So this thing, I open it up. Okay. So we have books schema, and inside we have books. I just drop this books. Okay. Delete table books. Okay. Or it's not delete, it is drop table books, and I execute it. So there are no tables called books here. Now what I do is I go to my backend application. I hope the server is not running. I run the server. Somebody asked, how did you connect the front-end application to backend application? We run the backend server. We run the front-end server, and you send the the request to that particular URL. That inside RMI call, API call, creates the ports and calls the particular method that is mapped to that request. That everything happens internally. You need not do anything to connect backend server and front-end server. You just do an API call to an existing valid URL. The connection happens on itself. Clear? Now I run the server. So you see, there was no table, so it created the table books with connections. With connection object. Okay. So I come back here to the MySQL workbench and refresh the schemas. So in the books schema, we have books table created. Okay. Now I go back to my front-end application. Now you tell me some books, book name. Hello? Tell me some book name, I'll add it. What book name? There was a book called Deep Learning. I forgot the author name. Deep Learning. It is not Deep Learning, it is Deep Study. Deep Work, sorry. Deep Work. This is a very good book, guys. You can read sometimes. Okay. Who is the author? Cal Newport. So I just give his name, Deep Work. Long ago I read this book. This is a good book. Okay. I just give Cal and I clear everything here and I just tell submit. Okay. So it established the connection with the database, with the backend server application, and request was sent to this particular URL, and the payload was deep work and cal as a Java JSON object. And when we sent the request, it came to our application. It came to our controller class. The control was transferred to this particular method, and we are calling save book of service class. It comes here. There is the service implementation. It comes here and it calls book repository.save and passes the book. And to this book repository it comes, and here we are exposing the save method, and it established the connection. The connection was already established. Using that connection object, we created the prepared statement as an SQL statement, and we sent the book name and book author as the parameters for the statement, and that book was created. You can see book created book with some you can see it here. I'll just expand this. So if you can see this created book, okay, we'll go back to our MySQL workbench, and you see I'll just to select star from books. Okay, and I'll execute this command. You see one is created, which is called as deep work, and author is Cal. Any questions, guys? Any questions?
Sir, till service layer it is clear, but
Okay.
how we are connecting the database, that is still we have a confusion on that.
Okay, because you are seeing the code for the first time, you feel like confused. I just explained the steps, right? You add the dependencies, okay? Then you add the credentials in application.properties file, your JDBC URL or your database URL and your username and password. Then you add the class name, okay? If you go here, it is there in system library in java.sql, okay? In java.sql, this jar file is added. In this package, you have this driver class, right? So this class com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. This is the class file that you have to add. And don't worry about this. We are not using. I just added it. So this after this, you are clear adding dependencies and providing the credentials.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Then in database configuration file, you have to create the data source for this particular driver class, URL, username, and password. Clear?
Yes.
Okay. And using this data source, you have to create JDBC template. Clear?
Yes.
It calls this data source and it creates JDBC template. Okay. And you are returning all the URL, username, and password to establish connection, because we have to pass URL, password, and everything. And this URL, password, and everything is extracted from application.properties file using @value annotation. Clear?
Yes, sir. If we use JPA also, we have to write this code.
Yeah.
Configuration,
Yep.
everything.
Yep. We have to use if you use Hibernate JPA, you need not do any configuration. You just have to provide some URL and everything, but not all these configuration. Only for creating JDBC template, you have to do this, not for JPA.
Okay, JPA Hibernate, it is automatically take care all these steps.
Yes, yes, yes. Data source and everything will be created by JPA, data Hibernate.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Next, we in the book repository implementation, we have to get the connection. How do we get the connection? Using driver manager.getConnection method, right? You need not do anything else if you are using data JPA. Okay, I'll just show that code also. That will help you. Where is that? There was SpringBoot. This is a simple application, guys. You can go through this documentation. This is very good to understand. Okay, I wanted to tell you this also. It gives you a simple introduction and everything. I referred this actually. Okay, so if you are using data JPA, SpringBoot data JPA, come back here. All these things I have covered. Okay, so this also uses MySQL database. You just need to create an interface that implements data JPA. Okay, you have this entity. You have to create entity class. Since we are not using data JPA, we need not. I have not created entity class. Entity class represents the table. I have talked about this @entity annotation earlier, and it is a table. Okay, all these things you just need to annotate as a table annotation, and it is employees. Okay, table name. It will create that table in that particular schema. Okay, then you have to create a repository or DAO layer, and you just have to do this. Okay, you just create employee repository that extends JPA repository, which is mapped to employee, which is an entity. Okay, this is an entity, and you map it to that entity, and this is an ID. Okay, that's it. You need not write all these SQL queries and everything. Nothing is required. You just call save, and it will write all the queries and everything, and it saves. Okay, that is the power of using JPA. Clear?
Sir, I have one query. Here, long, they have mentioned, what is it long? It means like which variables data type?
You can see it here. They are calling employee service interface, service implementation. So here we come, save employee. Okay, so they just call save. Long is mapped to some ID or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
JPA repository mapped to employee and long. Okay. In employee class we have ID, and you can read it. That we no need to add at repository annotation because Spring Data JPA internally takes care of it. Okay. So we have the next thing, data CRUD operation on the entity. Okay, I'll check it. What is this long? Okay, you can just add employee also. You need not worry about long.
Sure.
They might be using this somewhere else. Employee service. They are just passing save employee. You see, have we defined all these things? Save, find all? No. In this particular thing, the JPA repository interface or implementation will have the save, find all, and everything. Okay, you need not worry about defining all these things. Here in our project, since we are using normal JDBC, we have to define this. We have to get the connection. We have to write or prepare the statement as the Java string and give it to the prepared statement object, and we have to execute update. Nothing needs to be done if we are using data JPA. Okay.
Sir, what about if we are using joins?
For that we can create. Okay, for that we can create those particular this thing. Here we have, right, we create the methods, the custom methods we create, and we can give the implementation for that, for joins.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Any doubts? Any other questions? Good questions. And we come here, and this will execute our statement and updates our database. So this completes a full stack discussion of React, Spring Boot, MySQL, using React, Spring Boot, and MySQL. Any questions, any doubts, guys? This completes almost everything.
For
that I want.
controller class.
Huh?
Controller class.
Controller class. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So book controller.
So one annotation starting.
This annotation.
Cross origin is.
This we have to give. I wanted to tell you, I forgot. This cross origin annotation means your server side application is running on port 8080 and your local host, your client side is running on 3000, local host 3000, right? What our system does is, our browser does is, it will not allow these two ports to communicate directly. Okay, we have to give permission. So we use this cross origin. If we comment this out, okay, I comment this out and save this. I stop the server. And I run the server again. Okay. So my server is running, started server. I come back to my SpringBoot React application. I clear this. I tell some ABC, XYZ, and I submit. Okay. You get cross origin error. If you go to headers, what happened? Sorry, this should show error, man. Sometimes. Okay, I tell submit. Response? No. My browser is reacting. I just reload this. Then I tell submit. What is this? It is showing an error, but I don't know why it is happening like this. We go to console, you see, has been blocked by CORS policy. Okay, cross origin. I forgot the request service, some policy is there which will not allow communication between one port to another in the local host. For that, we have to give permission. In this port, give allow permission or allow to receive API calls from this port. So we tell that cross origin. For that, we use cross origin annotation and tell that from this origin, from localhost 3000, any request you please allow. Okay. Clear?
Yes, sir.